Welcome back, everybody. This is Night Flight. I'm Judith Kober, and today two good friends are back, Swiney and Jerry Marzinsky. You know them both. Both of them have been on the show a couple of times, and they need no further introduction, I guess. And if so, you will find out everything what you need to know about them. Just click on the links in the description box. So, Sherry and Jerry, welcome back.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you. It's nice to be here again.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us back.
So, yeah, where do thoughts come from? When I was preparing for this interview, I looked up what so-called experts. I'm a little bit allergic these days when the term expert comes up, but nevertheless. And here is what one said. Thoughts are a product of the way the mind interacts with our environment to create a story. Would you agree, Sherry?
That's partially correct. And I've read where other scientists will say that thoughts originate from the nervous system, but they don't explain how they get into the nervous system. So you know, yeah, that's partially correct. The environment has a lot to do with what we're thinking. But the original thoughts that come through the environment that are, you know, say the news media or your neighbor or, you know, the gossip in town or whatever it is, that originated from those people, right? And you heard it and you have your thoughts about it. So what I'm thinking, and of course nobody really knows for sure, I don't think, but what I'm thinking is there's a cosmic mind. And that is permeating everything. There's your cat. So that's permeating everything. And in that cosmic mind, there's the polarity, there's the negative and the positive. And so you are being bombarded with thoughts. You're always walking through this soup of conscious mind. And if you have a memory, say, of something that happened to you, and it could be like 5 minutes ago, or it could be 10 years ago, whatever it is. But so you're having this memory, you go back into your memory kind of spontaneously, but depending on how you feel about that will sort of dictate the nature of the thought that is attracted to you. So here's these thoughts in the cosmos, and they're always there. And then they will be attracted to you according to what frequency you're putting out. That's my theory.
Okay. And Jerry, what would you say?
Well, I'd like Sherry. I'd say that's partially true. Sherry and I both know that there are entities out there that do inject thoughts into your mind. But usually there's an awful lot of trauma before those entities can take control. And they feed off of that negative emotional energy. But one thing that both psychiatry and psychology have abdicated was that we are spiritual beings. You know, in 8 years of college and graduate school, they completely ignored that. And it's not the mind that thinks. Well, what Sherry and I just, we interviewed somebody who was a representative of John Maish in Australia. And I got the book and I found it absolutely fascinating. And what John says is that the mind itself is the apparatus that takes pictures of what you focus your attention on. So its job is to formulate wherever you put your attention to take a picture of that. And then that is connected with the spirit, where the actual spirit does the process. It's where the reason lives. It's where the hard drive is. And he equates the keyboard to the mind, or the we're the computer screen to the mind, where you just get the picture, but you don't get any of the information. The information resides on the hard drive, which is the spirit. And psychiatry is completely devoid of spirit. Both psychology and psychiatry gave up trying to study the human mind because it's not tangible, it's not measurable, you can't see it, you can't feel it, there's no way to measure it. So with psychology, they just, William Wundt, I think he said, well, enough of this stuff, we'll just measure the behaviors that are reflective of the mind. So now they got this DSM-5 with all these psychotic maladaptive behaviors, and they call it mental illnesses. But according to Meisha's theory, there is no mental illness, because all the mind does is take these pictures of where you focus your attention. And we're all raised with the belief that we are our thoughts. You know, everybody has this voice in their head talking to them constantly. And it's constant gibberish. Da, 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 da.
It starts
But-
usually when you open your eyes in the morning. Then
Yeah,
the chatter is already there.
It's already there, but you weren't born with it.
Mm.
You weren't born with that chatter. You learned that chatter based on, you know, like Sherry says, your past experiences, what's happened to you, your traumas, all that stuff. And then that voice, you know, people think you're that voice that's always chattering to you because you're always talking to it. But if you're that voice, then who's listening to it? Who's the one that's taking it in? Who's the one that's listening to it? Who's the one who's looking at the images?
Mm.
That's
That's-
true. That's exactly right, Jerry. I mean, if you think about it that way, a person, when you're getting bombarded with thoughts, you can actually step back and look at those thoughts happening. So they're not happening. They're not happening in you. They're happening to you. And so you have a choice at that point, at that particular point, to accept or reject any of the thoughts that are coming in. So, you know, and we can be influenced. Of course, we can be influenced by our surroundings and the things that come into our heads, whether it's from television or radio or movies or news media or whatever. You can be influenced by that, but you still have a choice whether to accept the thoughts that come your way, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. You are the one who focuses your attention, and that's what you are. You're your focus. You are your attention. You are your perception. And Carlos Castaneda said that there is no reality. There's only perception. It's what you actually perceive as your reality. And John May says there's three different aspects of reality. There's your personal reality, your personal history, what you've learned, what you've been exposed to, the traumas you've suffered. There's physical reality, which is everything around you. And then there's the energy reality, where there is no time and space. You know, in order for time and space exist in physical reality, in order for time to exist, there's got to be three components. There's got to be matter. There's got to be space for that matter to move around in, and there's got to be energy to move that matter. And that matter is considered the passing of energy or time. So when somebody gives you a watch, you can actually see that matter moving on that hand. So without those three things, there is no time. And in the energetic universe, there is no time, because there is no space. You know, there is no matter in that universe. So what Mace says, which is very intriguing, is, and I've noticed, I mean, I was looking at reading his stuff, and it's like bang, 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 bang. And it was weird how this came about, because I get a lot of email from people that say, you got to look at this, you got to look at that. You know, here's all these videos coming in, and this fella contacted me, goes, you have to talk to this woman in Australia. And there was something different about that. And I'm going, yeah, I need to talk to her. And I didn't know why. It was just the way this guy came across. So I called Sherry. I said, hey, there's something going on here that I don't know what it is. You want to be in on it? She said, yeah. So we both talked to her. So Sherry's had the experience too. And what she was saying was very interesting. And you can see this as I talk. When you are exposed to a trauma, you know, your world shrinks and your attention focuses right on that trauma. So there's a lot of people in car accidents, they say, well, time virtually froze. Everything else was blotted out and all I saw was this little aspect of it. So what May says is that those traumatic incidents are hammered, like seared or branded into your consciousness at a time where your consciousness is collapsed. So you're really not aware of it. And after the trauma, you make some decisions about yourself and your relationship to that trauma that you're really not aware of. So I was speaking to a client the other day, and he had a tip of his nose bit off by a dog, and his dad was taking him to the hospital. And his dad was yelling at him because he thumped the car door or something like that. So he made the decision that he felt worthless based on his dad worried more about the car door than about him bleeding where the dog had bit a chip off his nose. Yeah. So what I asked him to do was to get a vision of that and think about the decision he had made. Mm-hmm. And he got a hold of that and realized that he made a decision that he was worthless based on that. And that he was looking at the image of that incident and he was not that incident. And that kind of drained the energy from it. So the Course in Miracles talks about projecting. So both of these things are based on frozen energy that is stuck inside. And Mace says that your entire perception is based on all these frozen energy fields due to all these traumas and experiences you've had throughout your life, but it's the negative ones that get frozen. Because when there's a negative emotion, your ego pushes against it right away. So there's a pressure ridge he talks about. So you don't want to experience that thing. You try to push it out of your memory and push it into the subconscious where it eventually gets buried. But you know what happens is when somebody comes into your sphere of influence who has that same trauma and triggers it, then you blast them because you see them as the problem when what they did was triggered it in you. So, you know, like they say, when you have one finger pointed outward, it's three pointed inward. You know? So May says it's all these traumas that trigger these memories that then trigger how we react to them. So instead of owning them and draining them, we attack the person who triggers them and try to drive them away. Go, no, it's not me, it's him. Mm-hmm. So that creates this circle of thought that reinforces itself. And no matter where you go, if you have that particular trait in you, can go from here to China, and then you'll attract Chinese people that come and trigger those traits. So the universe will continue triggering them until you get a hold of what that is in you that is frozen due to some trauma in your past.
Yeah, and that does those triggers actually, the thought forms that the triggers evoke don't come from you. They come from the cosmos. They come from outside of you. And so there's this thing that we all know about is called collective thought. So the whole world, everybody's thinking something, and those thoughts are coming from the cosmos for whatever reasons. So all of these thoughts are coming and going. They're coming out of people because thoughts are things. They're actually measurable now. We have the equipment to measure the thoughts, the positive and the negative thoughts, and they have different frequencies. So we're in this great big huge stew of positive and negative frequencies that are in thought form. And if we catch one of them because that's what we're feeling, then that'll generate a thought in us. So we can run with it or not. I find this fascinating.
Yeah, you can look at it like a radio. I mean, thoughts have different frequencies. So you turn it to a different frequency, you get a different kind of music. So there's low frequencies, and it's the individual focusing his attention on that dial that is turning that frequency that determines where that frequency ends up. So low frequency thoughts will attract low frequency people and other low frequency thoughts. Now, thoughts are things like Sherry says, and in a way they're alive. So what they're doing is looking for reinforcement, to verify that it's a valid thought.
Mm.
Yeah. So
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're constantly picking things out of the environment that reinforce the way you think as correct. And when you're done, you're back to where you started in that same loop, because you're finding evidence to prove that your thinking is correct.
Mm-hmm. So what about these geniuses that once in a while appear here? Let's say once in a generation, I don't know, a really genius mind. Is that they are tuned in to something?
Well, I think Sherry kind of hit that. And what was interesting, I was did a Google search on where thoughts come from, and what came up were a series of people that had dreams that created inventions. All right, so the actual thought came through the dream, and believe it or not, the benzene ring was the mystery of the benzene ring was figured out through a dream. Tesla had a lot of dreams where he invented stuff by that way. Google was actually developed by a college student who had a dream that he could collect all this information and put it in one place. The sewing machine was invented by somebody who had a dream. So here's these things coming in from the universe, like Sherry said. It's a field that is feeding these things. The movie Frankenstein was created by a dream. The periodic table was created by a dream. The structure of the atom was figured out through a dream. Salvador Dali's persistence of memory came from a dream. Even the movie The Terminator came from a dream. So yeah, there are thoughts that come in to the radio set from the universe, and they come in through dreams. They come in through, like you're working on a problem and you're stuck, and you're just completely stuck, and you go do something else, and boom, it shows up. But these are all non-physical things. Here's psychiatry and psychology going, oh, well, especially psychiatry. You're feeling bad, take a drug. And what they're doing is they're just drugging the mind senseless with these toxic drugs and not curing anything. They're just piling chemicals on top of the problems. And psychology, by just reiterating, talking about the problems over and over and over and over, all they're doing is reinforcing those same problems. They're not doing anything about them. They're just, oh, you poor thing, you went through this stuff. And then the person goes to the next person and tells that same story. And that's actually reinforcing and ensconcing that negative aspect of what's happening, instead of dissipating the energy unit that created it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're right, Jerry. When you talk about how when a person goes through a trauma, they stuff it down because they don't want to feel that feeling. I know what that's like.
Yeah, so, you do. You do. And then there's an energy ridge there where the thought and the consciousness is pushing it, trying to push it away so you don't have to experience it, but it's still alive. It's buried alive.
Well, it's still alive in the subconscious, and but it's hidden from the memory. And so to find it, you really need some help to find it. One of the things that I've experienced, and I learned this from Sherry, the lady in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of disconnected things that came to mind during working with her, and she would ask a question about that thing, and then I would come up with whatever my first thought was about that thing, which seemed to be totally disconnected from our discussion. It was just a first thought that came in. You know how you do association.
Mm-hmm.
And then she'd ask me about that. And then we'd go down this little road and she'd ask me to come up with a word, the first word that came to mind about this thing. And I would say the word. And then she would ask me about, well, what does that word mean to you? So, we really went down this rabbit hole and discovered some things that had been buried for a really long time that I wasn't aware of. I had no memory of it at all until she was able to get me down that rabbit hole far enough to see it. I'm like, oh, wow, that's totally interesting. It really, I can see where that program is going to really help a lot of people.
Yeah, me too.
She
I'm
talks
fascinated.
about that. Yeah, she talks about how thought is actually, without the other two elements, there is no time. So in the spirit realm, there is no time. I know that.
And thought is an energy unit.
Yeah, because I've traveled in spirit and I've traveled to the no time place. And in that place, whatever you think manifests instantly. Or wherever you want to go, you're just there. There's no travel, there's no space, there's no distance, there's nothing. It's just you're in this particular moment and then you're not.
Yeah, and I've used that in working with some of my schizophrenic patients too. When the voices started, I envisioned as clearly as I could a roll of duct tape being unwound around the voice's mouth, and it would shut up.
Yeah.
And there was one time where I asked the patient, I was doing that. I did that a number of times. And one guy asked, well, did it shut up? He goes, no, still making noises. It's going, like it had duct tape around its mouth. So what we envision in this universe happens in the energetic universe to some degree, which is, and can be used against those voices. To shut them up.
The thing is, all the talk about we create our own reality, and I believe that's true. Whether it's a positive or negative reality, whether we're aware that we're doing it or not, we're still creating our reality.
Right. And what Nash says is that, yeah, you're creating your own reality, but if you've got a negative reality, it's because you've got a virus in the program. He's saying we were all born perfect, like the Christian scientists say, but we all get these traumas, which are viruses, which affect how we view reality. So, and then you project that out onto other people. And if you have something in you that's negative, you will see it in them. And if you have a little bit of in you, it takes a lot of it in them to bring it out. But if you've got a lot of it in you, it just takes a little bit in them to bring it out. So you can trace that back and go, well, I'm upset with this person because he's blah, blah, blah. And then take a look at that and go, what is it in you that is the same thing that if you didn't have it in you, you wouldn't see it. You couldn't see it.
Yeah, it's the whole mirror aspect that the Essenes talk about.
Yep.
They talk about the 7 mirrors, and I've studied them, but I don't remember everything about them. But it's fascinating. It's all about you see in other people what you either like or dislike about yourself.
Right. And then if you can come to grips with that and go, okay, I see I have that in me. And what happens?
I would agree to a certain degree. Because I certainly do not have the wish to enslave the entire world and get off on it,
Oh, sure.
So
Yeah.
when people
Excellent
tell
point.
me, you just see that in that person because it is in you, I have to say that's a crock of shit. Because I don't have that desire.
Nor do I, and nor do most of us.
Nor do I, but I see it.
Yeah,
I see
and
it.
you see it,
But,
yeah.
But, it depends on how, it does upset me some, but it doesn't drive me crazy, and it's like, I know Sherry kind of has distanced herself from that front too. I'm still out there fighting it, but,
Well, what I'm doing now is I'm passing around new information that comes my way to everybody, and they can either read it or watch it or not. That's up to them according to what their life path is. And I spend a lot of time thinking about and projecting about a world that is not in slavery. But I don't get emotionally, I'm not emotionally attached to the shenanigans that are going on. I don't like it, but you know, it's not triggering something in me that, you know, I don't
Yeah.
think that that's a mirror thing.
Right,
going on with
right.
me.
It's the
Or is it
emotional
with you,
trigger.
Judy?
Yeah, okay, but that is important to make that distinction. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
I
Because
agree.
otherwise, if people swallow that hook, line, and sinker, then they will not distinguish between.
No, they'll misinterpret it. They'll
Yeah,
misinterpret
yeah.
what we're saying. And so we
Yeah,
don't, we want to
and-
make
and-
sure that we're clear.
Yeah, and then
on-
when they locate, let's say, a genocidal monster out there, then they think, oh, yeah, oh wow, it must have something to do with me. Otherwise, I wouldn't see it, you know. And then here comes the slippery slope
Yeah.
where you drive yourself nuts.
Oh, sure. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, so now a lot of people, I should say, some of the news media is talking about hoarding.
Mm.
Well, I subscribe to a group on Facebook that is, they're farmers, they're homesteaders, and they're growing their own food and they're putting it away for wintertime. They grow their food in the spring and summertime, and then they put it away for wintertime because the plants don't grow in the summertime. And so the news media is actually, or actually wasn't the news media, it was Facebook, was putting up these little notices to people saying, are you afraid of people hoarding? And this went into this homesteaders, referring to this homesteader group. We're like, you gotta be kidding. You know, is that a perception they're trying to build around people who are growing their own food, that they're hoarders? No, I mean, maybe they're trying to develop that kind of mindset to the uninitiated, to the unlearned, to the ignorant, whatever you want to call them. And maybe they'll believe that, but that couldn't be further from the truth. You see, so they're trying to, what I'm seeing in our society is they're trying to build a narrative that is completely opposite of the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to get a lot of people to believe their narrative. Well, what I see is that that's failing. Mm-hmm. Maybe that comes from my not having that mirror aspect of wanting that to happen. I don't really know, but I don't see it happening. I really don't. I don't see the majority of people buying into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but they do their best.
No, the other part is it's just hard to believe that they would do something like this. It's like, you know, back when the Nazis were killing everybody in concentration camps, even the people in Germany didn't believe that that was happening.
Yeah,
know?
I know. And how did it start?
The same way that's it's starting right now.
Yeah.
Yep, the same thing happening over again. So here we can recognize what happened because we've already seen it happen. So people can recognize it, but they just don't believe it. Mm. You know, just like the German people didn't believe it. You know, even when they were shown it, it was like they had a hard time believing.
Cognitive dissonance sets in. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
no kidding,
so we're aware of it, you know, so we can see it, and we can see all the people getting sick, you know, passing out in soccer games and on the football field, just dropping dead. You know, but people don't want to believe that others would do something like this to them, that there was such evil that exists on this planet as to do something like that.
Mm. So that seems to have a lot to do also with awareness. You know what I mean? When awareness arises in you, yeah, meaning you can have thoughts all day long, but if you are not aware of them, if you have no idea what's going on in your head, and if you have no awareness of yeah, your surroundings and how to spot, yeah, a fraud or a lie or whatever, then yeah, you're most likely very unaware. And the moment a specific awareness arises in you, I think that also makes changes in the collective. Not
Yes.
dramatic changes, but
Oh, I
Yeah.
totally agree with that, Judith.
I do also.
You know, we are to paint a picture, we're actually in a matrix.
mhm,
And the way the matrix works is that any change in the matrix, it's a fractal. So any change in the fractal will change the whole thing. It might be a tiny little change, but that'll make a change and that'll affect people. And then the more people that become aware, the more changes happen in that fractal. And pretty soon the whole fractal is different.
And I think that's why all of us are putting out information every day, passing along information to wake people up.
mm,
Yeah, and I think sending around solutions is highly important. You know, I mean, I'm trying to come up with solution. My main solution is walk away. You know, I mean, that's the simplest way I can put it, is just walk away from it.
yeah. So
And-
sometimes, you know, there are scenarios where, yeah, walking away from it, even if it's only mentally, does not really work anymore. For instance, I know one journalist here in Germany, he is actively thinking about leaving this country, going to Montenegro, because what is coming down the pike here. Yeah.
Mark Windows left Britain and he's in Bulgaria now for the same reason. He doesn't want to deal with the crap that's happening over there.
Well, Max Egan left too. He left Australia and he's in Mexico now. So, and he wasn't planning on leaving because he was planning on staying and fighting. But then he found out that the police were asking questions and they wanted to come over, and he thought, well, he had just had this strong impulse that, okay, I think it's time to leave or I'm not going to be able to fight anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So fortunately, he had friends in Mexico that he could go to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that way here in the United States everywhere. It's not that way where I'm living at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice, but
Yeah. So
California and New York are gone. I mean, California.
Yeah,
New
yeah,
York
that's
and-
true. That's true.
they're
And
gone.
Canada seems to be pretty well gone.
Yeah,
too.
Canada's gone.
But going back to where thoughts come from,
mm,
see, all these thoughts are being focused upon. And if we could somehow get people to be aware that what they're focusing on, they're creating.
mhm,
And so if enough people decided, okay, I'm not going to take this stuff in, I'm not going to let it push any of my buttons, I'm not going to do any of that stuff. I'm going to instead, I'm going to imagine that the world is free.
mhm.
And that small imagination, it's a tiny little imagination coming from one individual, that's not going to change the world. But if everybody did that, if a majority of people did that, that would change the world.
Oh yeah.
You know, because then the police could come and knock on your door and you can say, you know, I don't recognize your authority over me. And they wouldn't be able to do anything at all unless they want to shoot you right there and commit murder in front of everybody. They probably wouldn't do that.
And the other thing they're stoking is fear. They're stoking as much fear as they can. And the more we play into it, the worse, the more energy it has.
Well, I saw a James Corbett video the other day, and he was talking about how the Great Reset thing is happening. And it's because these people who they're very, very rich and they have the money to you know, support what they want to do. Yes, but they're imagining how they want the world to be. And it's through imagination that they are creating, collectively creating the world they want to create. And we're not, well, money or not, that's an advantage that they have.
Yeah, but the mental field is leveled.
The mental field is level throughout the whole cosmos.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is, if that group, they know how imagination works, they know how imagination creates. The vast majority of people, of everybody else, doesn't really know that. If they could know that, if all of us got together and imagined a different world, because we're going into a different paradigm, whether we like it or not. It's a matter of, how is that paradigm going to play out?
Yeah, how do we shape that?
How do we shape it? Yes. And we shape that with our thoughts, which is our imagination, which is really super powerful. And it's not something that's tangible, but everybody has imagination. So if they're imagining that, oh, you know, they're going to win, well, then they'll win.
Yeah,
We imagine.
If they give up, for sure. You know, there's a lot of things people could do: pass around information, write to legislators, take part in protests. But if you're just sitting around and letting it happen, you're not part of the solution.
Well, even if you're sitting around not doing anything but imagining a different world, and you get other people to do that with you, that's very powerful. And that could bloom so that they wouldn't know that that's what we're doing, because we're not, you know, we're not out there with our banners and, you know, we're doing this silent thing as a big collective, as a big, you know, we're in this cosmic mind, and we have the power to imagine a different world.
I can imagine shutting down the friggin' mainstream media, just everybody not tune in. They're being hurt right now, big time.
We don't even have to imagine anything like that, I don't think. If we spend our time imagining shutting down the mainstream media, that's not going to change the world.
If you do that and you don't watch them, you have to take some kind of action on that thought, you know, to make it materialize in this realm. Something has to be energized in that thought to bring it into a physical reality form. Protesting, writing to legislators, talking to other people. But if you can sit there and imagine, yeah, but most people aren't doing that. They're just, oh, whatever, you know, it doesn't affect me directly, so I'm not worried about it. And they turn on CNN at night and get another dose of propaganda from the communist news network. They're not even aware of what's going on in the bigger picture at all.
No, they're not. And so I think shows like this are hopefully going to help people become aware of their own power, especially their power of imagination. That is how to escape the matrix.
Exactly. They want you to feel powerless, like you can't do anything about any of this. You know, they're mowing us over, and the more we give into them, the more it's going to look like that's the case.
Yeah, and then people throw in the towel before, the battle even started.
Right. Yeah. That's what they want. That's exactly what they want.
Yeah, and
that's why it's
some
good
display advanced obedience, even that.
Yeah.
Hasn't even been asked of you, but they're already doing it.
Well, and that comes from our training as children. You know, because we're conditioned, we're programmed to believe,
throughout the school system.
Yeah, and even our parents. You know, if we have very controlling parents, then we're going to be programmed to think, well, you know, these guys have authority over me, and I don't have any authority over me at all. And then we go to the school system and we get that again, and we go to the church system and we get that again. And then we grow up and get out into the big world. And then we have, you know, corporations, our bosses, our police department, you know, and the news media and so on, doing the same thing. And all along we're thinking, well, I don't have any power of my own. What can I do? I'm just one person.
Yeah, we're programmed to obey these fools.
Yeah. And that brings me to back to the collective mind, and that sometimes, at least it appears that way, that certain thought forms can take over entire societies. And usually it starts out with, dehumanizing a certain group, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment you have dehumanized them, then of course you have a field where you can justify your atrocities. Yeah, because many people don't even see them as humans anymore.
Yeah, I don't think that the people who are running the show right now look at us as humans.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, they look at us as the same way they look at animals, and we know that animals have feelings.
Yeah.
We know that they have emotions, and so we know that. They don't know that, and they look at us the very same. Now we can take this a step further in the collective mind that's being controlled by an even more advanced mind, which is not on the earth, or maybe under the earth, but they're not human. So there's a lot of talk about that these days, more talk than I've ever heard about that. Because years ago, when I was, saying it very discreetly to, just one or two people, that I don't think these people are human. And, I would get kind of like, well, you might be right, but, it's kind of way out there. And now I'm seeing that more people are talking about that openly, which I'm really glad to hear, because it's putting out the seed, to plant the seed, to make people more aware that we're not just dealing with human beings that are being evil, because human beings are not evil.
Mm.
Not at the core. That we didn't come here being evil.
No.
Humans didn't anyway.
No. Yeah.
No, so we had to be fed, we had to be taken over, we had to be coerced, to have those evil thoughts and to go with it. And then we could be threatened, and we could be blackmailed, and all kinds of sorts of things to manipulate us.
But one thing we found interesting, and I checked this out with Sherry and several other people that heard voices, is that the voices that schizophrenics hear run a very repeatable pattern over and over again. And that pattern exactly matches what the mainstream media is putting out to us right now. Mm-hmm. It's the same kind of information that the voices tell psychotics that the mainstream media is telling us right now. You're no good, you're stupid, you're worthless, all the way down the line. We got a list of like 23 of them. So there's a one-to-one correspondence between what the voices are saying to schizophrenics and what the mainstream media is saying to us right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see that too.
Yeah, I can imagine in Sherry, when you talked about, I mentioned it privately to a couple of people. Hey, what are you smoking?
Yeah, exactly. That was a while ago, maybe not too long ago, maybe just a few years ago. Mm. I was in a chat, and people were talking about how this was before the whole debacle started this time, and they were talking about some of the stuff that was going on, and I said, I think they're not human. Mm-hmm. And that it took a while for the responses to come back, but they did come back by, one or two people saying, well, maybe you're right. I mean, okay, maybe I'll think about that. Yeah. But that's what I see, because I know the human beings are not evil. We don't start out being evil. And so, but we can be changed if we let ourselves be changed. We can be changed for the good or for the bad, because it's our choice. Mm. So,
and then that perpetuates.
And then it perpetuates, and we can be, if we can be talked into believing atrocities, then we can be talked into performing atrocities.
Oh, yeah.
That's what's so dangerous with this child abuse stuff, with these child kidnappings and rapes and murders. I mean, that traumatizes them for life, and they're going to pass that on to generations, based on that trauma. It's got to be stopped.
Yeah, and I mean, I went through that too, and the way that I had to stop that was to be conscious of it, conscious of that propensity to, to do to somebody else what was done to me, kind of as a reflex. And I would just fold myself up and stop it. And if I had to ask the person to leave the room before I hurt them, I would do that. Because I just didn't want to hurt anybody.
Now, there's still stuff that slips through, in a reactive moment that you're not aware of. It just, boom, it gets thrown out there. Even though you're kind of pulling the horse by the reins, trying to stop the big stuff. I mean, there's still stuff that gets through. So it's doing so much damage to society to allow this to happen. And people are they don't want to see it. They're not aware of it, even though it's being broadcast by the underground media constantly about this child trafficking, and Biden's part of it, and Hunter Biden's part of it, and half of the Congress is part of it, and they just don't want to believe it. They just don't want to see it. Even though there's people coming out saying, yes, they did this to me, they trafficked me, that this is what I experienced. They just don't want to believe it.
Mm. Sorry.
I was just going to say, no, it's too horrible. It's the last blog that I wrote, I talked about when somebody hears this kind of stuff, it shocks their conscience.
Yeah.
And they can't, they would rather not believe it than to go with the conscious being shocked and look at it. It's just too painful.
They just found a whole freighter off the coast of California with 200 kids in there. 10 of them, I think it was 12 of them, were dead. And they were all chained to the walls, and they were skeletons. They looked awful. That did make some of the Newsmax and that stuff, but you wouldn't see a word of it on the mainstream media anywhere.
So another aspect that plays into it, how we can, make our own lives stressful is, who would I be without my story? And that is, some people have that story playing for years. They are not conscious of it, but there is a story running that is telling them, oh, I am always the one that meets the wrong man. I am the one who always gets screwed. I am the one who never wins the lottery. I am the one who gets always bullied. You know what I mean? And
exactly.
And depending on the strength of that story that we are telling ourselves, it might manifest in really horrible ways.
Well, it does. And you can see that in the wives of alcoholics who they get divorced from one alcoholic and they go, I'll never do that again. They get attracted to a man who looks like he's decent. And a couple of months after they marry him, he starts drinking and it happens again. And then they get divorced and it happens again. I've seen that over and over and over again. And they're not even aware of it. They're subconsciously attracted to these kind of people because that's how their world should be. That's what they think it is. I deserve this abuse because of those hangups that, those energy ridges that they had
that's
when
where
they were
a
young.
person has to stop and see what the denominator is of all of these things.
But like you said, sometimes it's hard to find.
Yeah, and so but the denominator is always you, the individual. Like I'm the denominator for all the things that have happened in my life, and you're the denominator for all the things that have happened in your life. So that's a given. And the way to correct that is to be able to question it, ask the question, why does this happen? And if people don't even ask the question, why is this always happening? and then step back and listen. Because you can ask a question and then not even listen, just walk away and let it just go. But if you're actually serious about changing your life, then you ask that question and you wait for an answer. And the answer is going to be, well, if I stop and think about it, I'm the one that's always there.
Well, yeah, you're ultimately responsible, but a lot of people don't think like that.
Yeah, well,
They just watch it happen to them. They go, oh no, here it comes again.
right. And so if they can stop and think about, well, okay, so in every single relationship that I've ever had that's gone wrong, what's the common denominator? And then the answer is, I'm the one that's always there.
Mhm.
These are different people and I'm the one that's always there. So what have I got to do with this happening? And that's
true.
a valid question. And so if you can ask yourself that question, then, you don't have to get too deep, but you can get pretty deep in this, like, where do all these thoughts come from after all? And get into that. But the main thing is to ask yourself that question. Well, why am I attracting these types of people? Because I'm the attractor. What is it about me
That's
that's
right.
what is in me I'm mirroring. I'm not liking the stuff that's going on. So what is it in me that's similar?
Mhm. Yeah. And that might also have to do with, let's say, childhood experiences. A lot of people have the tendency to marry their father or mother.
Mhm.
No
Yeah, I
matter.
married my father. Yeah, no question about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I realized it, I walked away.
Yeah.
So the answer for me is to, if I'm in a situation, then I see it and I'm aware of it and I want it to change, then I have to be the one that changes. So, I have to be the one that makes the change in myself.
Yeah. So Sherry, I have to ask here is, on your picture, is that a Stargate?
Yes, it is.
It is. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And what doesn't show on the right is the two Earths, and they're splitting.
Okay. Mm.
But you can't see the whole picture. If you could see the whole picture, you would see another Earth. You see the little wormhole type of thing coming off of the Earth. Well, that's connected to a different, another Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Do you think that is literally possible?
I think it's metaphorically possible.
Mm-hmm.
That we're probably going to go in two different paths. The human race is.
Well, what's intriguing is that there's a fellow on YouTube who says he is in 2027 and he's sending YouTubes back of all these places, airports that are completely empty, shopping malls that are completely empty, city streets that are completely empty, and he's the only person there. And so they showed him going to a Google on a computer, going Google, what's the date? And it was, December something, 12/27, down the line. So all these people are writing to him and said, okay, go to a hotel, go to a shopping mall, go to an airport and film there. And there's not a single person in any of those films.
So
And
he
then,
has like a, now, what is that movie with Will Smith? I Am Legend. So he has a moment like that.
well, he's actually in that reality, and Sherry's picture of the two worlds reminded me of that, because there was somebody who came on, one of these commentators, that said, yeah, that's the world that's being prepared at present. And it just blew my mind, because none of this made sense. Here he is in this giant airport, and he's showing, the flight schedules and the counters and all this stuff like this, and there's not a person there. There's not a person anywhere.
That's
And
interesting.
in the police station, he gets in the police car and he drives it away. There's no people there. Everything's on. The lights are on. The doors are open, but there's no people.
In the Bible, Jesus said that I go to prepare another place for you. And that was however long ago that it was written. So how does that happen?
I have no idea, but I found it fascinating. It was on one show called The Impossible Channel, where he shows all these weird things that seem like they're not possible. And,
So
you know,
in his channel is called the Impossible
The
Channel.
Impossible Channel. It's somewhere on one of his films, where he showed it 2 or 3 times already, where he goes and he gets these guys videos and he broadcasts them. And I'm going like, well, how would he do that? How would you go into an airport and make everybody disappear from the airport so you can just take a video of nobody being there? You know, the airports are operating 24 hours a day. So then somebody made a comment that reminded me of Sherry's picture there with the earth being prepared for another reality. It just boggled my mind. I just found it interesting. Because it just doesn't seem feasible that he'd be able to do that in shopping malls and airports and police stations and drive away with a police car.
Well, maybe he was transported to some future time.
Well, I think that's what it was. And he even said it was 2027 or something. It wasn't way far down the way, but there wasn't a soul in sight.
But if I understand correctly, not all his videos are like that. He also has, so does he, you know, change from timeline to timeline? And is he now in 2021 or where is he?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how he gets those videos back from 2027 where he is to be shown on YouTube here. I don't know how that happens. And I don't know if he travels
the
back and
mechanics
forth.
of that would be interesting.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
wild.
I don't know if he travels back and forth and he actually comes back to this timeline or whether he's stuck there. What I saw one time was he picked up a note on the staircase in I think a mall or something, and it said something it was a blue piece of paper. It said, well, sorry, we were messing around with time machines and you got stuck where you're at, you know. And he actually showed that, and I'm like, well, that's interesting. So apparently he's stuck there, but I still don't know how he gets the information back.
I don't either.
It boggles my mind. I mean, that's an impossible thing. It's like, how does that happen? I don't know, but it's intriguing.
Yeah. So, okay, that concludes our first and the public hour, and we will see the patrons on the other side, and we will switch the subject a tiny little bit. Until then,
I'll bet.
we see you all next time.
Okay.